Okay, so we're recording now, and I'm going to go ahead and get started with the introduction. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to those who've introduced yourself in the chat. So my name is Geneva Blackmer. I'm the interim director for the Interfaith Center at Miami University. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that seeks to unify people through relationship building, dialogue, and social action. And this workshop is made possible by a generous grant from the McCullough Hyde Foundation as part of the Interfaith Center's Building Healthy Communities, Strategies, and Resources for Faith Communities project. So we're very grateful to McCullough Hyde Foundation for providing the funding for this workshop today. So with that, I want to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Richie Hall II is a highly respected psychologist and mental health advocate, known for his innovative clinical approach and commitment to community healing. As the founder and lead psychologist of PsychWorks Clinic, he specializes in dialectical behavioral therapy and motivational interviewing through a systems theory lens, providing essential mental health services in Cincinnati and Oxford, Ohio. His career spans roles in academia and clinical practice, including 8 years as the coordinator of substance abuse services at Miami University's Student Counseling Service, and previous work with children, adolescents, and seniors in outpatient settings. His research focuses on the intersection of racism and mental health, particularly Black men's health, reinforcing his dedication to culturally competent care. Beyond his clinical work, Dr. Hall is a leader in the field of Black mental health advocacy. As the president of the Cincinnati Association of Black Psychologists and founder of Cincinnati Black Therapists, he fosters collaboration and community building among Black mental health professionals. He also leads a Black men's support group and a teen substance use program, both of which provide critical spaces for healing and empowerment. In addition, he serves on the boards of the Cincinnati BIPOC Mental Health Directory and the Cincinnati Academy of Professional Psychologists. A frequent speaker and media presence, Dr. Hall shares his expertise through podcasts, television appearances, and academic presentations. Most notably, his Ask Dr. Hall segment on local Channel 12 and his podcast, Psychologize You. Outside of his professional work, he is a dedicated husband and father, free, deeply engaged in his local community. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Dr. Hall.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank you for joining me today for this important conversation. As she previously said, my name is Dr. Rich Hall, and we're going to talk today about how we can work on, in our sacred spaces, trying to create safe spaces for people around mental health. So for faith leaders, laypersons, community members, how can we better support individuals facing mental health and challenges, and do so from a faith perspective. I will talk today about some skills, in particular, as she previously mentioned, my background is in dialectical behavioral therapy and motivational interviewing. I'll talk a little bit more about what those therapeutic approaches are. And we'll also talk a little bit about how we validate emotions and encourage meaningful change and navigate difficult conversations with empathy. So I will say I want this to be somewhat interactive. So we have a chat. If you do have questions, you may drop them in the chat. There will be a Q&A at the very end. So you can drop them in the chat as you think about them. I'm a little ADHD, so I like to get a question out before I lose it. Either write it down or drop it in the chat and we'll answer your question throughout. And there will also be discussion moments in breakout rooms in this so that there are opportunities for you to talk amongst yourselves about some of the questions we have and some of the issues we'll be covering today. And so with that, we'll get into the presentation and start talking about how we work to create safe spaces within our sacred spaces. How do we bridge mental health and faith? A little bit about what our agenda is for today. We're going to be talking about mental health through a faith lens, working on breaking stigmas and myths that people might have around mental health in faith, with faith backgrounds. We're going to talk about ways to acknowledge signs when they do come up of mental health struggles, some tips on navigating difficult conversations. We're going to do some role playing, like I said, in the breakout rooms, and then how do you know when you should be referring out for a higher level of care, professional care? how professionals of faith as well as professionals of mental health can work together. And then we'll do, like I said, a Q&A and a closing reflection at the end. First, we're going to talk about why we're here, and I also want to make sure that I start by saying I come from a Judeo-Christian, so Southern Baptist background. So much of my presentation is going to come from that lens. That's just the faith that I know the most about, so I'm going to speak from there. But I do believe, understand that this is an interfaith center. There are going to be people from all sorts of backgrounds. So I do believe that there are often commonalities within faith. And so while I'm speaking from my particular worldview, I encourage you to adapt as you can, the ways in which this might be seen and understood through your worldview and through your faith background. And as you do that, like I said, I'm going to be pulling stuff from the Judeo-Christian Bible in my discussion. But as you think of your own spiritual teachings, I'm going to be speaking to some of those universal truths. But I do understand that I'm limited in that regard because of my own upbringing. But I do believe, like I said, some of this is going to be universal. So why are we here? Because faith leaders are often the first persons that people turn to whenever there is distress. One of the things that when I used to teach intro to psychology is I would always tell people that whenever colonizers would land in a new world, they would build a church first. They'd build shelter, usually in the form of some religious gathering space. So it is sort of ingrained in the human that we seek solace through our faith. A lot of people seek it. And so a faith leader is often the first person that someone might go to before they even consider a therapist or a counselor. And so whether that's a struggling youth or a grieving parent or someone battling addiction, as a faith leader, you are a source of comfort and wisdom. And so people seek you out because you are trusted, you are a guide for them, and they can feel safe discussing their personal struggles within a faith-based setting. So in many ways, you can be the front line if you are a leader in the faith community. So pastors, ministers, and faith leaders are often the first people that know when there is something spiritual or emotional going on with someone, but often not necessarily trained in mental health, which can leave people feeling uncertain on how to respond and feel unprepared when encountering someone with depression, anxiety, trauma, or addiction issues. And while scripture and prayer and pastoral care can be essential, sometimes you can recognize that you have personal and professional limits on what you can provide. And so in that regard, mental health support can be needed and helpful. So when do you refer? We'll talk about that in much more detail. And I think we'll talk also about some of the misconceptions that mental illness is just a spiritual issue. And that faith, if strong enough, can overcome struggles like depression or anxiety. I believe that faith can be powerful, spirituality can be powerful to the individual and to the collective, but that mental health challenges are real and can affect anyone, including devoted believers, and that you might meet what are the limitations of what you can do for someone. And so just as we support medical care for physical health, we should also encourage professional care around mental and emotional well-being. And so that's the perspective that I'm coming from in this conversation. And that faith and mental health can and must coexist. That mental health care does not in any way replace faith. It can purely strengthen it. And that therapy, medication, and counseling are tools that can work alongside prayer, scripture, and spiritual guidance. I believe that God has given people counselors, doctors, therapists for a reason. And so the wisdom that they are provided can help other people heal. And as I said, I'm going to review some of the models that I operate from that I think apply and align with spiritual and faith teachings. But I will say as another preface that this is not like a training on how to do DBT or motivational interviewing. In order to learn those skills, you got to go much more in depth than what I'm going to do today, but that we can be thoughtful of how the perspective of these theoretical models can be helpful as you consider ways in which to ingrain or approach mental health related issues. So when we talk about mental health concerns, I guess the first discussion topic, we don't necessarily have to do a breakout for this, but if someone can drop in the chat or if you can raise your hand, what concerns or questions do you have about mental health in faith settings? What hesitations might you have? What challenges might you have seen? And then what tools or support do you feel you might need? Are you able to raise your hands in here? I don't know if you have the ability to raise your hands or unmute. We didn't talk about that.
They should be able to unmute.
Okay. A team of supporters, clinical dismissal of spirituality and faith as valid methods of achieving psychological well-being. Yeah, no. Very often, people feel that there is a pushback from people who from clinicians like myself who don't appear to recognize the value of spirituality. I do believe that, as I said before, I think it's an essential part of the human animal to engage in faith and spirituality in some form or fashion. And so a lot of people don't feel like people in mental health circles truly respect and value spirituality. And so I can understand that that concern exists. People who don't like to expose themselves to outsiders and feel they will not be heard. So very often church communities are very close-knit. Spiritual communities can be very close-knit, and you're not really sure who you can trust with regards to disclosing or talking about your mental health concerns outside of your spiritual group. I'm assuming that's what you mean, Valerie. But I have heard those types of concerns and hesitations before. Working in a work group to promote mental health in the Baptist Convention of Atlanta, the project helped break the stigma and open up conversations on this subject. So nice. I'm glad to hear that there's a work group on promoting mental health. Who had their hand up? I didn't see that person.
Myra, did you still have a?
Yeah. The first thing that came to mind was you just keep praying to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers.
Thoughts and prayers. Yes,
Yeah.
we'll talk a little bit about some of those myths and stigmas in the presentation today. So yes, no, that is a thing that comes up a lot for people who are struggling with mental health issues, is they feel like they're just sort of brushed off with just work on your faith, just continue to pray. And these things should be resolved. But unfortunately, there is a time where you do need professional help and support. So I appreciate that comment, Myra, for sure. Any other concern, John?
Yes, could you hear me okay?
Yes, can hear you great.
Okay. Yes, when when I was growing up, there was a pushback that mental health professionals were maybe even too secular or humanist and potentially could take us in the direction of the devil or something. And so I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about, for somebody that's has that strong of a reaction to mental health, are there any ways that we can thaw them? And I really appreciated the person that said that they used a DVD projection to help people work with stigma.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that there are a lot more Christian and therapists of faith than ever before. So there's a lot of practitioners out there who will put their faith front and center in their treatment and in their care, or put their spirituality front and center. And so as we've diversified the field and as the field has grown, more people feel comfortable having that as part of their clinical identity. And so a lot of times people looking for practitioners can just outright state they'd like one of Christian faith, they'd like one of Buddhist faith. They can just sort of request that and find well-educated, well-trained, experienced clinicians who have those. So the idea that that they're all secularists isn't necessarily true. And so We'll talk a little bit more about how you help someone in the process of getting to mental health support, but the recognizing that the field is a lot wider than it used to be, and there are a lot more people practicing their clinical skills from a space of faith. With that, I think, and thank you, John, for that question. With that, we're going to move to the next slide and the next part of the discussion. So when we look at mental health through the faith lens, we can recognize that, like I said, I'm coming from a Judeo-Christian model. The stories of Elijah and David and Job are key stories in my faith. And those of us from the Christian background can remember Elijah and his great spiritual victory over the prophets of Baal, but he also became overwhelmed, fearful, and depressed, even asking God to take his life. So through the lens of what we now understand to be mental health, he was having a spiritual crisis, but also, someone coming to you with that type of crisis, we would look at it through the lens of the DSM and say they were having a depressive episode. They were feeling hopeless and amotivated and suicidal. And that in that space, God didn't rebuke him for his feelings. He sent an angel to care for him. He was given food, water, and rest before God would speak to him. And so the idea that his practical needs were important before addressing his spiritual concerns. People often can need rest, nourishment, and care, that God can acknowledge emotional struggles and meet them with compassion and provision. Then we talk about David's situation where he experienced I hit the wrong button. There we go. Deep sorrow and emotional distress and mental anguish. And he was also met with he was also met with compassion, and that his struggling didn't mean that he lacked faith, and that he had to trust God even in that hardship, and that his faith was an anchor. Mental health challenges often don't disqualify someone from having faith. They can have immense faith, and it could be a reason to lean into. A lot of times when I'm working with clients, reminding them of their spirituality and their faith and what it has taught them can be a good anchor for them to manage their troubles through a certain lens. And as I said before, spirituality can be a great anchor for someone who's in crisis. And then Job, who experienced immense loss and pain. We all, those of us from Judeo-Christian know Job's issues, and that he, through it all, was able to overcome and maintain a certain resilience in his faith. Once again, faith being an anchor for someone who's in the middle of a personal, a professional, and family crisis, right? Was still given through his faith, once again, the positive outcome of his reward, but also that he did struggle mentally and emotionally with regards to this external crisis, and had to lean on his faith and maintain that resilience. So that even though we struggle in our personal, professional, emotional, psychological lives, that doesn't mean that our faith has to weaken, that faith is the only thing that we can rely on, and that you can be provided help, support, and care in the form of outside external things, be it you as a faith leader being there for the person, but also recognizing that you need additional support and getting the person to that support they might need. And so as you think about your own journey, this is another opportunity for discussion. I guess, have you ever empathized with these stories of Elijah, David, or whomever in your faith? And what can these stories teach us about mental health? And so I'd like you to take 5 minutes in your breakout room with these 3 questions. And I think, did the breakout rooms get created, Geneva? Or do I have to do that?
I think that we were just going to assign them automatically, but how many did you want?
I think with the 16 people, about 2 or like maybe 5, like 3 or 4 people per room.
And do we have the questions? Maybe we can put them in the chat since we won't see the slide.
Yes, I can do that. I didn't even. Oop.
Okay. Should we maybe just do 2 rooms so that we have a moderator in each room, like
Yes.
yourself? Me? Okay. So we'll do that now.
Hello. We're going to talk a little bit more about the myths around mental health. Someone brought up at least one of these earlier. The idea that if you pray harder, you won't feel depressed. If you're struggling with mental health, you might lack faith. Christians or people of faith don't need therapy. Mental illness is caused by personal sin, or mental health struggles are always the result of personal sin or weak faith. There can be a lot of stigma around mental health, even in faith communities. And so when we think about these myths, we can find ourselves, we might have heard them before in our lifetime. I think John gave us a good one. The idea that clinicians are all secular, so they won't recognize or understand or be sensitive to your faith. Just like, it's okay in a lot of faiths, not every faith, to seek medical care for physical illness. Seeking therapy for emotional and psychological struggles is a way to honor the temple that is your earthly body, and that God has given us these tools to use to help ourselves on this earthly plane. And so we have to honor and respect that by seeking help and support. And the idea that sin is one thing, the treatment of sin, the addressing of sin is one thing, but that mental health can be another thing. It can be completely a biological, physical, and social issue that can be addressed through a mental health practitioner. And so, the idea that if we sort of reduce some of the stigma around mental health, we are helping people to understand that their sin is one aspect of their personal journey in this world, but that their mental health issues and supports can be different in that regard. I'm going to skip this breakout discussion in the case for the sake of our time. But we're going to talk about some of the signs of mental health struggles. I'm going to review some of the things you should be looking out for, and some of the things you might hear in a person of mental health distress. There's often going to be warning signs that you can look for. Those warning signs are going to be emotional, behavioral, as well as spiritual. So a person who is experiencing intense emotions, be it sadness, anger, guilt, feeling overwhelmed, identifying stress, verbalizing stress, telling you I'm stressed out. Those are going to be the types of things that when you're hearing these issues, you're thinking this person's being affected by their emotions in a way that might be disrupting their life. Behaviorally, you're going to be seeing someone isolating themselves, avoiding community, engaging in the use of substances. So a person who, you didn't know them to be a heavy drinker, or suddenly showing signs of heavy drinking or substance use. They're showing up into the faith community, maybe even smelling like, say, alcohol. So they're going to be the signs. Is a person you know to be tidy and well kept now disheveled? And now not looking quite like the person you knew them to be. So are you noticing major changes in their mood, in their daily activities, in the way they're engaging? Are they isolating? Are they no longer engaging? Have they stopped showing up to church? And then the spiritual warning signs can be open and vocal struggles with their faith. Are they expressing some hopelessness with regards to their faith or with their beliefs? Are they showing signs of suffering and spiritual distress? And are they verbalizing it to you or to others? And if you're starting to see that, how can you be there for them, help them with those struggles? And once again, we're trying to avoid looking only through the lens of faith, which is it about their sin or weak faith? But instead, trying to support them by creating a safe space for them as they express these concerns and troubles. How can you help them feel safe and heard? And we'll talk a little bit more about some strategies for that in just a moment as well. First, one of the treatment models that I use and have learned and been trained in is called DBT, which is Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. This is a type of therapy that was originally developed for people with intense emotions and distress. And one of the key concepts at DBT is that we balance acceptance and change. Acceptance is that we understand and validate where a person is in their emotional space. And that change is that we can help them move forward in a healthy way. And so while this model doesn't necessarily talk about fixing all the problems in someone's life, it does empower them to find practical skills to help them navigate their life and their situation. It's structured around four key skill areas. First is mindfulness, teaching a person to be present in the moment, which can help them emotionally clarify and show and connect with their spirituality. It can teach them distress tolerance. How do they manage pain? How do they manage distressing situations, upsetting situations, emotional disturbance without making things worse? So often you can think in terms of coping skills. In DBT, people have DBT recognizes that people can have positive or negative maladaptive coping strategies. And so you want people to find effective ways to tolerate distress and not engage in harmful coping mechanisms. Emotional regulation is a key skill area for DBT, how you understand and manage difficult emotions instead of being overwhelmed by them. And then interpersonal effectiveness. How do you strengthen relationships, set boundaries, and communicate your needs in a healthy way? And so each of these skills gives people the tools that can be helpful in a therapy setting, but also can align in a faith-based setting where people are healing. And we'll talk a little bit more in the next slide about how these things can do it, particularly around the four key DBT assumptions. So the key DBT assumption outside of the skill areas, which are mindfulness, interpersonal effectiveness, distress tolerance, and emotional regulation, are that people are doing the best they can. And so many faith traditions can emphasize compassion and grace and understanding, that people are doing their best with the knowledge and resources they have. So when a practitioner is operating from a DBT model, they are operating from this idea that the person in front of you is doing the best they can. Even if they're making bad decisions and poor choices, they are trying their best, and we have to find a way for them to realign their behaviors and their thoughts and their feelings to be better aligned with their personal values. And I do believe that that applies to once again, a faith tradition where compassion and grace are important components. And then in the mental health space, we think of it in terms of non-judgment. We are not judging the person for where they're coming from or what they're trying, and that we can help people without blame or shame. And so in that regard, like I said, I do believe it correlates well with how mental health practitioners and faith leaders approach the individual. Participants want to improve. It's the idea that most people want to do well. They want to feel better. They are distressed. They want to be in a place of peace, of calm, of health. And so I think that aligns with faith in the same way that many find themselves many faiths emphasize growth and transformation and renewal. The idea that we become new. And that in mental health, a lot of times we see people as resistant and unwilling to change, but from a DBT framework, we highlight the importance of guidance and encouragement, that the person just wants to change. We have to help them figure out how to do that. The idea in DBT that people may not have caused their own problems, but they must solve them. And in our group, we were just talking, I think Valerie talked about a Buddhist who, it was their responsibility to help themselves through their faith. And that you have to want to change. And so in that same tradition, DBT operates from the assumption that people want to improve and they have some responsibility. It's not self-inflicted, but you have a personal responsibility to overcome the adversities that affect you. And that as a faith practitioner, you can provide resources, mentorship, and encouragement while affirming your people, so that they are not carrying their burdens alone. And then lastly, people cannot fail DBT. It's the idea that there is an unconditional love and grace. In most faith and healing circles, love and grace is unconditional. And in that same way, DBT approaches it that it can't be failed. You have an opportunity each day that you wake up to try again and to try to do better with regards to your practice and your mental health. And so you can, as a faith practitioner, reinforce this by creating safe, non-judgmental spaces where an individual can feel supported, even when they're struggling, and showing them the importance of patience and forgiveness that is often found in most faith teachings. I'm going to skip that slide and move to motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is a collaborative treatment model that helps people move forward without shame or guilt. Once again, this idea that shame can be a very powerful motivator, but also it can be a thing that is an anchor and causes people to resist change for the better. And so in motivational interviewing, you're trying to strengthen motivations in the title. You're trying to strengthen the person's motivations to change and align with their own values and goals. So you're not there to tell anyone what to do, but you're trying to help them discover their own reasons for change. And so as a faith leader, you know that many people might be struggling with change, be it addiction, mental health, or life decisions. They have a desire to do better, but they can feel stuck. So you're in a unique position as a faith leader or a person of faith to provide a safe and non-judgmental space for people to process their challenges. And instead of trying to persuade, you're instead trying to help them talk through their own motivation and their own personal strengths through some of the key principles, which are open-ended questions, affirmations, so highlighting their strengths, reflective listenings. It sounds like you're struggling with, I hear you saying that this is what you're going through. It sounds like a part of you wants to change, but a part of you might be afraid. And then summarizing. So what you're saying is you want to change, but you have some fear about it. Or what I hear is that, you'd like to be better, but it is difficult. It is hard. Open-ended questions, affirmations, reflective listening, and summarizing. Easy to consider. It takes a lot of practice. As I said, I'm not teaching you exactly how to do these treatment models. I'm giving you a very brief overview as a way to be thinking about the approach you might take if you're trying to help someone with regards to mental health. In brief interventions, one of the reasons that motivational interviewing is used a lot in a variety of circles, particularly practitioner circles, is that it is made for brief interventions. So the idea that you might not have hours to sit with someone and talk with them about their issues, but that even in a short conversation, you could be planting the seed of change. In motivational interviewing, we talk about it as like a pebble in the shoe. A person is engaging in these behaviors. They're drinking too much, or they're easy to anger, or they're too anxious. It's the idea that you are helping to give them a psychological discomfort in continuing to behave the way they've always behaved. So I always say it's like you're trying to plant a seed in them that grows to eventually change their behaviors. And you can do that in a very brief conversation. You can put that little bit of grit in their shoe that causes them to think twice the next time they start to do this thing, or the next time they choose to reach for the bottle, or the next time they choose to open that phone up and gossip. They start to think in terms of, do I want to continue behaving this way? And some of the ways that we do that are by engaging, that is building trust and connection. And so you start with being an empathic listener. And I appreciate you sharing this with me. I appreciate you taking the time to bring this to me. I can really see this weighing on you, right? Like connecting with who they are on an emotional level, and helping them to feel heard and understood. Focus is when you identify the topic around which they want to change, like what is the big challenge? What is it that they feel needs to be different? Allowing them to define the problem, not you defining it for them. Evoking is when you draw out their motivation, talking about how it aligns with, say, their faith or their values, how it might align with what motivation they might already have, or times in the past where they've made the changes for the better. And then lastly, trying to give them at least one small step, one little plan, one little part of the plan. What do you think you can do this week? What do you think you can do to get you closer to the goal, closer to changing this thing that you want to change in your life? Once again, there's just 4 steps to this. You can do this in a few sentences in just a small conversation. And that this goal isn't to fix everything all in one moment, but to get them feeling either capable of moving forward or uncomfortable continuing the maladaptive behaviors in the same fashion that they were before. The idea of moving them towards change, keeping them looking in the direction of change. It's about guiding and not directing. And as faith leaders, we all know nobody has all the answers, but that you can be a compassionate and guiding presence for someone who's in need of help and support. And so when you're navigating difficult conversations, like I said, you don't need to have all the answers, but there are just some key skills that we've already talked about in both DBT and motivational interviewing, that if you don't hear anything else I say today, please try and remember these two key skills. One is the power of validation. How can you help a person feel heard and understood, no matter how difficult the struggle they're having? How can you help acknowledge their emotions and their situations so that they feel like someone's there with them and that they understand? And that this is, one of the things that we're trained to do as clinicians is building trust and rapport. That's like key. The first 20 minutes that someone's in my office, literally the first 5, has to be helping them to feel safe and comfortable and understood. And sometimes that can just be reflecting what they're saying, what they're experiencing, and helping them to feel like someone's in the space with them and caring about them, and that they feel safe to spend this moment with you. So validation is key. When I'm training clinicians, I'm often telling them, if the person walks away feeling validated in the first conversation, then you've done more than your job. So be open to the powerful role that validation can play. And then open-ended questions is the second skill. The idea that you don't have to have all the answers. You can leave the floor open through a question that allows the person to reflect on their own experiences and needs, and open the door for them finding them finding solutions, as opposed to feeling like you have to provide all the solutions. A simple one can be, what has helped you in the past? I'll give everybody one of my key fundamental, like the cheapest, this is a Rich Hall. This is what I do when I don't know what to do, but also when I know what to do. Like a good open-ended question that you could just use anytime you're struggling with someone who they've told you something huge and you're like, I don't know what to tell you to do that. Or I might know, but I can't just tell you the answer. If you tell a person to step back and say, well, what would you tell a best friend? What would you tell a person you care about in your situation that they might need to do? The idea that if you can get them to, through an open question, other themselves, just look at themselves through the lens of someone else, it often helps to sort of lift the emotional burden of trying to figure out their situation and be open to the idea that there are solutions they couldn't see because the emotions are in the way. So really, one of like my key open-ended questions isn't just what has helped before, but like, what would you tell a friend who's in this situation? And that by asking that question, you're empowering them to think through their own situations. I literally, like 10 minutes before I got on this call, just told a guy, he was really worried about applying for a job. And I was like, well, would you tell your best friend to not apply, or would you tell him, good luck? And he genuinely said, this genuinely happened an hour ago. He said, I'd tell him, I'd be hyping him up and telling him definitely go for it. It's like, right. So what do you think you need to do? And so just a simple open-ended question. Once again, we can often feel our own emotional response when someone's telling us something heavy or overwhelming or stressful, and we can think we have to give them what they need. But in reality, just asking the right open-ended questions, being open to helping them talk through it, can be a good opportunity for them to find their way to the truths that are within them all along. When they're too far off, then you can try and like steer them back and guide them. One of the things that are key when you're trying to help someone in these scenarios is to be supportive, be open, be empathic, be caring, and try not to do some of those things that we talked about before as part of the myths. Try not to push someone to, well, you just need to pray more, you just need to make your faith stronger. Once again, if it's a difficult situation, a difficult circumstance, they might need outside help. They might need additional support. And so how can you help them find their way to that? When I don't actually know the answers here, let's go look for it together, is a more effective response. Being validating in regards to, thank you for bringing this to me. And I don't actually have all the answers. We can't solve this problem today, but let's work together to collaborate. And so sometimes just being supportive and being validating can help you to give the right types of responses, or the responses that helps a person feel heard and supported, because that's often what's key in a situation like this. I'd like to do one more breakout session where we can role play some scenarios. I'm going to put the scenarios in the chat if I can find the chat window again. Oh, Jen gave us some things. Fact. Oh, sorry, Myra. I hope I missed Myra. Focus on the feeling, acknowledge and accept the feeling, connect with others, and talk kindly to yourself. I think those are great. That's great advice when approaching mental health related issues. I'm going to put some role play situations into the chat for us, and then we'll do one more breakout room, and then we'll wrap up the presentation after that. One. And what I'd like you to do is, as you're talking, try to think of some of the tools that we just talked about and how you can maybe work through using those tools with someone in some of these scenarios. Oh, sorry. Thanks for coming, Kathy. Sorry you have to go so soon, and you enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to give you two scenarios. They're very brief. Just a young woman discussing anxiety and a father discussing being anxious after losing his job. If you can, as you go into the breakout rooms, talk through how you might maybe support someone. If someone could try to be the role player and the role playee, and try and apply some of the skills we've talked about as far as empathic listening and maybe your own faith-based principles. And I encourage you to, reflect on some of the insights that you've maybe considered before, what was challenging, what wasn't, what isn't challenging. And remembering that you're not there to offer solutions right away, but that you are trying to, once again, create an open and validating space for a person and give them the room to think through their own issue. So I'm going to send you off into the rooms as soon as I can figure out how to do that. And Geneva, are you still with us? I can't see you on the screen.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, thank you.
Did you want me to pull the breakout rooms up?
Yes, please.
Okay.
You're muted,
Right.
Rich.
Hello. I got like 2 more slides. We're going to do those and then try and do the wrap up because I do see that we're really low on time. All right. Knowing when to refer for professional help. Once again, we recognize that as faith practitioners, you do have limitations on what you can do and provide. And so when someone is experiencing significant mental health issues or physical issues, we do recognize that they might need professional care, and to recognize that while faith and spirituality can provide a lot of support, there are times where you need a professional to step in. And that those don't have to be mutually exclusive. They can work together, work in tandem to provide a holistic path to healing. And so some of the signs that you're looking for when someone's talking about wanting to harm themselves or harm others, when they're expressing these feelings of hopelessness to the degree that they want to harm someone, that's usually an immediate sign that you might need to engage professionals to get that person the help they need. And you can still be there as a spiritual support, but recognizing that that's a limitation. We often talk about in my profession, when someone's talking about wanting to harm themselves or someone else, then that's the one time I break the confidentiality of the therapy space. And in that same fashion, as a faith leader, when someone's talking in those terms, you might need to get more help. When they're struggling with their daily life, daily functioning, be it relationships, work, or their general well-being, that's usually a sign that this is a real and significant problem, and that they might need additional support to get to the causes of these issues and develop the coping strategies that can go beyond what faith can provide. When someone's experiencing significant substance issues, so overuse of drugs and alcohol, and that's starting to look like dependence or addiction, it's going to require specialized treatment. And so while faith can provide immense support through and during recovery, professional addiction counseling, therapy, and treatment is often necessary to address the physical and psychological components of an addiction. I often think on the verse of Ecclesiastes, that 2 are better than 1. If either falls down, one can help the other up. The idea that faith and mental health can work together to help a person and to provide them with the support. And that people don't have to go through struggles alone, whether that comes from the faith community or from professionals. There are benefits to working together. Particularly once you realize that you might have limitations in the type of support you can provide. So in working together, there are professional therapy and counselors who can provide faith-based guidance and support and help you navigate the challenges. Once again, it doesn't have to conflict with faith. It could be a space where faith is honored and integrated into the healing process. And then, as I said before, there are Christian counselors and therapists that incorporate scripture and prayer and spiritual guidance into their sessions and use evidence-based mental health strategies. So everyone I work with isn't from a faith background, but when I do have a client that is from a faith background, I will then start, if they ask. There are some clients who come in, they've had what we call church hurt. They don't want any faith brought into their therapy space, and I will not do that if that's what they ask for. But if someone has said, I would like a counselor who incorporates faith, then I will lean into their spirituality and ask them from that framework kind of like Valerie was saying in our breakout room, what is the faith? What would your faith tell you to do in the face of this challenge or this struggle? And like I said, even from secular therapists, faith is often respected and a source of strength on the healing journey. There are many support groups. Many support groups are available through faith-based organizations. Someone mentioned a Quaker group earlier. I think that might have been in a breakout room, but a lot of faith-based spaces. AA is a faith-based organization. And so engaging in those support groups can be a helpful way to integrate psychological principles and biblical values. And that I find group activities to be very healing and very supportive. So I strongly encourage people to engage in group-based interactions. Collaborate with therapists for holistic care and help to bridge mental health and spiritual support. Like I said, I've done a lot of things with my church organization and have worked with other church organizations because I do feel that's important. Often, if you know that there's a faith practitioner in your area, you can reach out to them and ask them to say, come in, do a workshop or a talk or anything. I recently, last summer, did a talk for on teens and mental health for the parents at my church. So they often find that very helpful, and we're often very willing to do that as clinicians. And then there are community and crisis services. Look up the hotlines in your area that are available. There is now a mental health hotline. I think the number is 288, I think.
988.
988. Thank you. Thank you. I got the 88 part right. Thank you, Valerie. You providing your people with those hotlines, those crisis hotlines for mental health, and then finding the community mental health resources in your area for immediate and long-term care can be helpful. And then recognizing that lifestyle approaches such as exercise and nutrition and rest and social connection are vital components of a person's mental health and well-being. Like I said, in my faith, we talk about taking care of your body as a temple, and that a person needs nourishment, not just spiritual nourishment, but also physical and emotional nourishment, and just engaging in a healthy lifestyle is one of the ways that we can provide that. And so, as I said, my main premise today is that faith and therapy do not have to be separate. They can work together to provide a holistic approach to healing. And so if you're a person of faith, you don't have to think in terms of we rely only on our faith, that we can seek out the resources and supports that we know are available to us to help a person get the help they need. And so with that, I can open the floor to any questions anyone might have, and you can drop those in the chat, or you can do the raise your hand thing, and we can talk.
We do have one in the chat already from Carol.
I saw that. Someone who's feeling totally overwhelmed can be difficult because overwhelmed, I think, once again, in my breakout room, Valerie did really well role-playing someone who's, beset on all sides by difficulty when doing the role play about the father losing a job. It can feel very pressing when someone's feeling so overwhelmed, and you can feel a pressure to want to help them and support them. And I think I go back to that validation I was talking about before, just working to acknowledge and be there in that space with them. You can acknowledge your own, like, I don't know exactly what to tell you, but I do know it sounds tough. I do know how overwhelming that can feel. Sometimes it's good to ask, are you coming to me for support? Are you coming to me to listen, or do you want help finding a solution? And sometimes just putting that on the table can give the person the opportunity to let you know what their needs are, so that you don't have to feel overwhelmed because you can't figure out how to help them solve this problem, but instead feel like you're there for them in a way that once again, they might just need to feel validated. They just might need to feel like someone's listening and someone hears them. Don't let their feeling of overwhelm become your feeling of helplessness. That sometimes just being there for them, being a support to them, praying with them, just spending time with them can be some of what they're looking for. Valerie, I see your hand up.
So today I went to go get my mail, and there was a woman down there, and she was crying in the clubhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And she was talking about her husband. This is the 4th year anniversary of her husband passing, and they had been together for over 50 years. I live in a senior building, so you get that. Okay. So I spoke with her and, was telling her about the treasures of the heart and that sort of thing. But at the very end, I told her, I said, I really think you might want to go get you some grief counseling, right? And we hugged and she went off. And then last night, another one of my neighbors called me, and he was telling me all these emotional things that he was going through. And so I referred him to some professional help. I can only do so much. But at the end of our conversation, he was laughing. And he says, I feel very encouraged to go ahead and seek out the help. I said, That's what I really need you to do. I really need you to get some, some professional help. I can help you on the little stuff, but
Right.
You got bigger issues than that's not in my pay grade.
Right, right. Above your pay grade, for sure. Thank you for sharing, Valerie. I think that's a key sort of the idea that just being with someone and being there to listen to them and recognizing that you don't have to have all the answers, and that when you've reached your own limitations, you can you try your best to connect them with or point them in the direction of more significant and professional help. So thank you very much, Valerie. Michael Gill asked a question. Any comment on the availability of therapists? It can be very difficult to find. 988 can be helpful, and so I encourage people to use those numbers. And 988 was started as a suicide hotline, but also is available if you're having any level of mental health help need or support. So it could be a person that you just call to speak with and say, "I'm in crisis. I'm struggling. I'm not doing well. I need to talk to someone." So those numbers. There's a text number. I think you can also text 988. Good to have you, David. Glad that you were able to join us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. So 988 is just one of the resources. A lot of practitioners are available virtually now. I'm old enough to have been around in the pre-COVID days and to be doing this job for as long as I have. There were a lot of therapists who told themselves they were never going to do virtual therapy. And then a global pandemic happened and everyone was in their homes. And if we wanted to eat, we needed to learn to be able to talk to a computer screen to do our jobs. So while there might not be in-person services in your area, there are a lot of therapists now who can see people all across the state and all across the country. And even like I got one client who's not even in America right now. So it's difficult as far as scheduling is concerned, but therapy is, thanks to telehealth, is available to people in areas where it never has been before. It can feel a little weird, it can feel a little awkward, but it's still a valuable way to get connected with another human being who can provide you with the help and services you need. So if you just look up telehealth, the website that I use is called Psychology Today. You can look up telehealth on there. You can just Google telehealth therapists in my zip code. If you're looking for clinicians, there's a mental health match, I think, is one, and there's
NAMI.
NAMI, thank you. Yes, NAMI is a national organization that can provide you with some resources. That you often have a state organization. So I'm in Ohio, so we have the Ohio Psychology Association. I'm in another organization, Cincinnati Academy of Professional Psychologists, which is once again local, but we have a directory. So and in many ways, once you start looking, there could be a glut of information. But no matter where you are, thanks to telehealth, you can, if you have a cell phone that has a camera on it or a screen, you can get the therapy you need. You will have to have a microphone. Sorry, Michael. But there are also text therapists now. That wasn't always a thing either. There are therapists whom you can text and have a version of a session with them. Watch out. Some of them are like some of the services, like not BetterHelp, but another service was offering like text therapy with a bot, with an AI. I'm not a super huge fan of that. But I do think it's good that there are now a wider variety of ways to reach therapists and clinicians than there ever have been before. Any other questions, comments, concerns before we wrap up? We've gone over a little, so I thank you all for staying with me through my presentation.
Any other final questions?
I just wanted to say thank you so much, and I really felt like I learned a lot, and just appreciating you balancing the heart and the head in this, and thanks to the people that sponsored this too. So it was really good for me.
I'm glad you got something out of it, John. Thanks for coming and attending and being a part of it. Oh, I'm glad to hear that I wasn't in the other breakout room, but I'm glad to hear that it went well in there with John and Julia. and David. So, and we sandbagged Fatima. She came in late and we made her role play. So thank you, Fatima, for being a good team player and walking into a strange room full of people and being willing to participate. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. You made me feel comfortable first day. So.
Good.
Mhm.
My whole job is making people uncomfortable and then comfortable, or vice versa. So I'm glad we got there together.
Thanks.
Oh, I don't see or hear any other questions.
Mhm.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Hall, so much for this presentation. It was great. And I'm seeing lots of positive feedback, so I'm very grateful to you. Thank you again to McCullough Hyde for providing the grant. And yeah, I hope that you all will join us for our next workshop through this McCullough Hyde grant project on food insecurity. And that will be with the local Oxford Food Pantry TOPS and the Family Resource Center. So we hope that you will join us again in 2 weeks. And yeah, have a great rest of your day or evening or morning, wherever you are in the world. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Thanks. Thanks, Geneva. Good seeing you.
Good to see you. Always a pleasure to have you, Valerie.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Doc. Appreciate
Thanks.
you.